Ahoy, me hearties, and welcome to the Pirate Republic. Today is Friday, November 28th, Black Friday, and I have a couple of Black Friday stories for you that happened in pirate history. So buckle in, grab those cutlasses, and let's get ready to set sail on the seas, the Caribbean seas. About 60 miles off the coast of Martinique, a massive French slaver that was called the La Concorde drifted under the Caribbean sun. She was armed and spacious and heavy with supplies. Yet she was cursed with one fatal weakness. Half of the crew lay sick with scurvy and dysentery, along with most of the slaves that were down below. The luck of the deal, the Black Friday deal, was not on their side, but it was on one pirate's side. Enter Edward Thatch, better known as Blackbeard, aboard his swift sloop, the Adventure. When he saw La Concorde drifting in the ocean, he hoisted his black flag, a grinning skeleton with a spear, and bore down on the French vessel like a devil coming to collect a debt. The moment that the La Concorde saw Blackbeard's flag, the crew didn't even try to fight. They were in no shape to fight anyway. All of those men, sick, tired, hungry, thirsty, they just surrendered on sight. Of its original 75 crew members, 17 were dead, another 30 were confined to sickbay. The French had even removed many of their cannons to make room for additional human cargo. So Blackbeard took the ship without a fight. He also conscripted 10 of the Frenchmen to his own crew, and then accepted 4 more who came aboard voluntarily. A practical man, he focused on the professionals, the skilled craftsmen, including a chief surgeon and 2 of his assistants. He also made 157 Africans stay on board, many of whom, whether as free members or captive laborers, would accompany the pirate until the day that he died. Blackbeard and his men soon refitted the slaver into a pirate war machine. He rechristened the ship the Queen Anne's Revenge. It was a 200-ton, 40-gun, 3-masted frigate, and it became the flagship of Blackbeard's mighty flotilla that soon grew to 4 armed vessels and about 400 men. The ship didn't just make him a match for the strongest naval forces of the day, it made him practically invincible. Most reports of Blackbeard's activities aboard the Queen Anne's Revenge came from crews and colonial governors who encountered him, many of whom likely exaggerated the pirates' number and force and weapons in their embarrassment at being overpowered. The governor of Bermuda, for instance, made the extremely unlikely claim that Blackbeard's crew numbered in 700s. In reality, the Queen's Anne Revenge probably carried about 200 men. Blackbeard did bolster the ship's firepower after taking control of it, adding more than a dozen extra cannons to the vessel. Blackbeard cruised the Caribbean on the Queen Anne's Revenge, raiding vessels off the coast of St. Vincent, St. Lucia, and Antigua. Common items plundered from raided ships included food, clothing, and especially alcohol. In the early 1718s, Blackbeard added to his fleet 2 new sloops, David Harriot's Adventure, and a captured Spanish ship. In May of that year, the group blockaded the ports of Charleston, South Carolina for almost a week. They took hostages and demanded ransom of medicine in exchange for the hostage return. The blockade of Charleston was Blackbeard's last major act aboard the Queen Anne's Revenge. Approaching North Carolina, the ship caught on a sandbar near Beaufort Inlet and sank. There it would remain for 150 years. But this ship was also, since it's falling on Black Friday when he had acquired it, is one of the greatest Black Friday plunders ever. An amazing free, because they just gave it up without a fight, pirate ship of an immense size and capability. If you're a fan of Blackbeard, I do want to point out that he is the main character of my books in the Storm of Time series. They're pirate time travel novels. The first one is Pirates of the Wild West, where the group of pirates that included Blackbeard and Bonny and Mary Read and Calico Jack and others are transported in time to San Francisco, 1873. In the second book, the pirates that survive are transported to World War II era They wind up at the start of the U.S. entrance to World War II, which was Pearl Harbor. If you're a fan of pirates, you're going to enjoy this adventure. Also, we do put out a weekly newsletter. It comes out every Friday. It's called The Pirate Republic, just like the title of this podcast. If you want to join the Pirate Republic, go to thepiraterepublic.com and sign the form. You can put in your email address so that you get it to your email every Friday. And you can also add your pirate name to that email so it will be personalized to you. The next pirate history story that we have happened on November 24th, 1718. It was the mutiny that crowned Calico Jack Rackham. Fog draped the mast like a thief's cloak when damnation came for old Charles Vane. He was the current captain of this ship. The sea held its breath as a French man-of-war drifted into view under the morning's pale light, a hulking beast of war and wealth. For a moment, all thought of gold and gunpowder died, because this ship was huge, and it was well armed. Vane had cold fear in his eyes. He ordered the fleet to retreat. He did not want to mess with this. But not all men sailed with that fear in their hearts. Standing among them was Calico Jack Rackham. He was the quartermaster of this ship called the Ranger, a man dressed not in dark leathers, but in bright calico, as if defying fate itself. Rackham spat on Vane's cowardice and cried out for courage, for gold, for fire in their souls. Well, he called for a vote. The sea echoed the answer. The majority of those pirates rose with him. They branded Vane a coward, stripped him of the black flag, and handed the helm over to Rackham. Charles Vane and 15 loyal souls were tossed into a captured sloop, given some powder and some slop, and sent drifting into the Caribbean. Ghosts in a small boat, while a new pirate lord raised a ragged flag high on the Ranger. With Rackham as captain, Calico was swaying with pride and his cutlass was gleaming. The pirate's life changed tone. No longer was caution their watchword. Now it was opportunity. Smaller sloops, nervous merchants near Jamaica, none were safe. Rackham's reign was brief, but in those few months he carved a name of fire and color into the ledger of infamy. And that, me hearties, is what mutiny looks like on the morning tide. Fear-soaked ship, a daring quartermaster, and a crew that decided this day that cowardice dons no crown. Another pirate history event happened on November 28th, this one in 1720. The trial of Bonny and Mary Read. The air in Spanish Town, Jamaica hung thick with heat and whispers as two prisoners were dragged into the courtroom on this day. Two women, though that hardly captured the truth of who they were. Shackled, bruised, and tattered from battle, they walked not with fear, but with the defiant posture of those who had stared down death more than once and found it wanting. Mary Read and Anne Bonny were no ordinary captives. To the British authorities, they were an embarrassment. To the pirate world, they were legends with pulse and steel. Just weeks before, their ship, the Revenge, captained by the infamous Calico Jack Rackham, had been run down in Dry Harbor Bay by the pirate-hunting sloop commanded by Jonathan Barnett. Most of Rackham's crew, deep in their rum cups, surrendered without a meaningful fight, but not Anne and not Mary. Witnesses later testified the two women fought with fury beyond human nature, firing pistols, swinging cutlasses, and screaming at their drunken shipmates to come up and fight like men. When the enemy crew finally boarded, they found the pair still battling, cursing, and refusing to bend. Anne and Mary didn't lose, they were simply outnumbered. In the courthouse, under the gaze of magistrates, officers, planters, and curious locals, the women were presented as a spectacle, an oddity of nature, a breach in the order of things. The charges read loud and long and predictable. Piracy on the high seas, armed robbery, assault, flying the black flag, waging war against His Majesty. Every man of Rackham's crew had met the same charges the day before and had been sentenced to hang. Rackham himself, Anne's lover, awaited the ropes at gallows point. But this trial felt different. There was an unease in the room, a sense that the usual order of justice had collided with the unpredictable laws of the sea. Witness after witness described the same astonishing truth. These women weren't mascots or captains' pets. They were fighters. One sailor swore that Mary did charge and discharge her piece with the best of the men. Another claimed that Anne had threatened to kill any man who faltered during a raid. A planter said he'd seen them aboard ships with pistols in their hands. Even the prosecutor seemed rattled by the consistency of the accounts. Anne and Mary asked no one to defend them. They offered no apologies. Their silence was not fear, it was judgment. The verdict? Well, the court recessed only long enough for the judge to sip some ale and catch their breath. The verdict was inevitable. Guilty, sentenced to hang until dead. The crowd leaned forward, eager for some sign of collapse, some wail of despair. But instead, Anne raised her chin, her eyes burning with a fire that even made hardened seamen swallow. And then came the twist that turned the whole proceeding sideways. Pleading the belly. When asked if they had anything to say before sentence was carried out, both women invoked an ancient right. I plead my belly. They were pregnant. A murmur rolled through the courtroom like distant thunder. Under English law, the unborn could not be executed. Even pirates' children had the rights the crown dared not violate. A midwife examined them both and confirmed it, both quick with child. The judge's face twisted with frustration. He could condemn them, but he could not kill them. The execution was stayed. Calico Jack would hang the following morning, the tropical sun baking his body as it swayed from the gallows. Anne was allowed a final visit. Her words to him were cold, sharp, and immortal. If you had fought like a man, you needn't be hung like a dog. Well, Mary Read never left the prison alive. Fever claimed her before the birth of the child. She was buried in a courtyard recorded only as Mary Read, pirate. Anne Bonny, however, vanished from the record. Some say her wealthy father in Nassau paid for her release. Some claim she escaped. Others whispered she returned quietly to the colonies, remarried, raised children, and lived a long life under another name. Whatever the truth, neither gallows, empire, nor history could extinguish the legend of these two women who stood before British justice and refused to bow. So, on November 28th, over 3 centuries ago, Mary Read and Anne Bonny reminded the world that piracy wasn't merely the domain of desperate men. It belonged to the bold, the relentless, the ones who chose freedom even at the edge of a rope. And the sea, and us, have never forgot them. I love this story. This is an amazing piece of history. And if you were fans of Anne Bonny and Mary Read, they both are main characters in my book. I'll say this again. If you're a fan of these two pirate women, I think you would enjoy my books. Well, that concludes this episode of the Pirate Republic. You can check out thepiraterepublic.com. The weekly newsletter this week for Black Friday had a bunch of pirate merchandise that I had curated. You may want to check that out. Go to thepiraterepublic.com and subscribe for the emails. Until next time, fair winds, mates.